Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the ARC Digital Transformation Viewpoints podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things related to digital transformation in energy, industrial, and critical infrastructure applications. The podcast is the creation of the ARC Advisory Group Digital Transformation Practice. ARC advises leading companies on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business. To engage further, please like and share our podcasts or reach out directly on Twitter at ARC_advisory, or please go to the website at www.arcweb.com.
Welcome back to ARC Advisory Group's Industrial AI podcast series. I am your host, Colin Masson, the Director of Research for Industrial AI, and I'm excited to set the stage for our third conversation with Dustin Johnson, CTO of Seeq Corporation. First, a quick recap of our previous discussions, if you don't mind. I think it'll help everyone, Dustin, if they didn't catch the first couple. But I reviewed them, and I think we really established three critical pillars of what I've been calling the industrial AI revolution, with that R in brackets. Mm-hmm. We always have discussions on what's really revolutionary and what's an evolution of things we've been doing for decades, right? But I think we've established that the idea of an industrial data fabric is a non-negotiable prerequisite. Data quality, governance, contextualization, etc., is needed for any successful AI use case or deployment. The other note I made, I think you were the first person that I talked to on one of our earlier podcasts about the idea of Gen AI's real benefit being, or primarily being, Gen UI, a knowledge engine, if you will, a way of interacting with complex systems, but it also forces, and I can't remember, did you say it was like a subtractive UI, right?
Yeah, subtractive manufacturing analog there. Yep.
Right. And so we talked a bit about that idea, and now I have it in all my surveys, by the way, Dustin. I call out Gen UI as kind of like one of the primary use cases for Gen AI. And then we did start to touch on the idea that the future promise is in agentic AI, right? I think we agreed, and I don't think we're going to agree on everything today, Dustin, but I think we've agreed a lot in the past, and we agreed that the path to true operational intelligence isn't going to be a single monolithic model. It's going to be a distributed architecture of specialized AI agents, each using the right tool, whether it's an AI tool or an ML tool, in that broader industrial AI toolbox. It could be computer vision, and these are all things we talked about in our first couple of conversations. But today I kind of framed this third conversation based on our earlier discussion in the week, that we really wanted to start talking beyond the chatbot, thinking about how you leverage machine-to-machine AI for agentic orchestration. And I know you're passionate about this idea of machine-to-machine really being maybe the next step or the next few steps. So why don't we start there on why are you so excited about this idea of industrial value coming from machine-to-machine uses for AI?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Colin, for that tee up and the background there. You even reminded me some of what we've talked about over these sessions. I will say that, AI is one of those things that has revolutionized and is going to continue to revolutionize a lot of things. And most people, their first interaction with what we talk about when we talk about AI today, right? Like we're really talking about LLMs generally when we talk about AI these days. And most people's first interaction with that is ChatGPT, right? Or some sort of, a Gemini or
Gemini or Microsoft Copilot.
Exactly. Yeah. One of those big
whatever.
ones, right? And that's what I think a lot of people think about, and that's what I thought about for the first bit here. The thought has gotten momentum in my mind more and more that is a good human to machine interface. I think one of these days we're going to get tired of typing in ever increasingly long prompts and such, and there'll be, increasing revolutions there. But the machine to machine application talking to application is just as interesting, and I would say maybe provocatively even more interesting than the human to machine. And the reason why I say that is because of your intro there for the industrial data fabric. Just like you, I spend a huge chunk of my life thinking a lot about how to integrate various pieces of the industrial data ecosystem together, because the value, every vendor will tell you that 80% of the value lies in whatever database or tool they represent, right? But the reality of the situation is that most of the value lies in the interstitial tissue between and the humans that are there. And so the reason why I get excited about AI contributing to the machine-to-machine piece is because it's that interstitial piece, right? It can really add, that old math of 1 + 1 = 3 might actually be the case here, right? If you can get context from one place, time series insights from another place, and planning or forecast data from another place, and then stick those together, that can be really, really powerful. And I think that's probably maybe immediately obvious, but AI playing a role in that is, we have entire industries, cottage industries and global system integrator industries, that are trying to stick those things together and have been for the last couple decades. And this is a technology that I believe has promise to lower the barrier there and grease some skids.
So maybe flesh that out a bit. What are you actually doing to make that a reality? Machine to machine.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Yeah.
You're excited about it, but now I need to know. All right. Well, what are you doing about it, Dustin?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's a good. Put me on the spot. Yeah. No, it's good. Right. Yeah. You're right. I'm excited about it as just a thought experiment. But I'm the CTO of a company that plays in this space. Right. So I'm also okay, great. I can throw my hat into the ring. And what is Seeq doing about it? Well, what we're doing about it is we are excited about what we see today, but we're also excited about what we see tomorrow. I'll talk a little bit about both of those things. I think what we see today is Seeq has been focused very much on time series, right? That's our core bread and butter. Connecting to time series. Time series is unique in its challenges because it's a very skinny but deep form of data, right? You'll get like a temperature, pressure, or thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of temperature, pressure, speed signals over time, but very little context and awareness data around it. There's very little for AI to work on. Machine learning models and stuff need to be primed, need to be hooked up to that data. Like, there's a lot of curation that needs to happen there. So context is the name of the game, right? So we're very much thinking about how to ever increasingly bring in more context from people's minds, but also from other members of the industrial ecosystem. In connecting to that, we've put a lot of effort into building connectors to time series, and we have connectors to other types of data, but they're relatively narrow. As we increasingly get an enterprise view, we know we have to connect to more stuff, right? But we don't want to greedily connect, and we don't move data. We leave it where it is. And so MCP and A to A, these sort of modern twists on REST API, but making it really AI friendly, it's the right time for us to say, what, we can connect to these additional sources of context, this additional source of situational awareness data that will help bring the value that's locked in the time series data to the forefront. We can connect to that using these new technologies, right? And we're starting to, and building an MCP server ourselves, and then building connections to other ecosystem players, MCP servers and REST API and legacy things too, but really doing that in an AI first way is very much the approach that we're taking. And we're using it to accelerate, but we're also using it to get that information, that data, in a way that has previously been locked behind bespoke schemas inside individual customers and such, right? So leveraging AI to homogenize the schemas there is very exciting.
And I think let's come back to a couple of things you raised there, because I think you mentioned MCP, and I think you were one of the first people I talked to when MCP isn't actually all that old, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But you were one of the first to kind of prompt me that maybe MCP was going to be a big deal, that it was really going to make us rethink the way that AI, let's not call them chatbots,
Yeah.
whatever, right? That
Can
AI
interact.
agents or programs or APIs, whatever you want to call them, would interact, that there would be a standard way to do that. And obviously MCP and A2A kind of need to go together, right? And before you can do MCP, you kind of need unified namespaces to provide some of the context, right?
Yep.
But we've talked about that in the past, and that's an ever-evolving topic. But I think the key point there is really that you called out yourself. You are, I would say, you're the leader in providing insights using time series data, raw data, and providing real insights on it. I think last time I surveyed that, and it was cross-industry, it was about 30% of the respondents kind of had time series data as one of their major data sources, which is actually higher than I expected in some respects, because, there's a lot of discrete industries that we don't think of as really using a lot of time series data. And we had all the, other data types and transactional and computer vision and a whole bunch of others in there. So it's significant, but it's not the only source of data. And I think that's where I think you were starting to unfold, one of the questions I have posed to you in the past, which is really, well, this is great. You're the leader in providing insights to time series data, but if you're going to continue to grow and become an even more critical component of that ecosystem, the data fabric, how are you starting to add additional insights or work across those other data types? So maybe flesh that out a little bit for me.
Sure.
Before we come back to maybe the machine to machine and human to machine, machine to machine. And I would argue
all the combinations.
All the combinations we're going to get to, right?
Yeah. So I think you're right. We have focused, our niche up till now has been time series data. And I don't see that changing. Like that is, we continue to believe that there is significant untapped value in time series data, especially in, we're an industrial focused company. And, we're trying to make a real impact here in the industries that power our modern way of life. That's, very, very near and dear to our hearts. And time series is a fairly underserved, in my view, market for how impactful it is to waste and yield and efficiency and environmental concerns and sustainability, all of that, right? I mean, there's real value to be had there. I don't need to tell you or your listeners that, but just that's very much in my mind. And so when thinking about the value that we as a company and me and my engineering team can bring, we continue to see value there. Like we're still mining that space, and I don't see that ending anytime soon. But we are getting increasing questions from our customer base to be like, okay, great, you've led us all the way to 10 steps away from the lake, the water, and we want to go that last little mile. And so we've continued to think, okay, great, like once the time series has been contextualized, once you've gotten those insights, you've gotten that aha, and then you've explored how you can take that aha and roll that out across a fleet of assets or lines or facilities or plants. Like once you've scaled that, then what do you do next, right? And so monitoring by exception was our answer to that a year or two ago. And now we're thinking, okay, so now that you can monitor that, then what about corrective actions and such, right? And we don't have to be, I mean, at Seeq, we have a philosophy of we don't have to be everything and we don't want to be everything. We want to interconnect and we want to be part of that ecosystem, right? And so, yeah, we do have a lot of ambitions when it comes to maximizing the value of our customers' data, right? Helping them maximize the value really. And a big part of that is being an ecosystem player. So maybe that's where some of my enthusiasm around these interconnection techniques like, MCP and A to A and others, right? Just the bog standard REST API and a good old Python script moving stuff around. It's not going to disparage ways of getting the job done, but really being an ecosystem player there, I think it's so clear that that's really the way to move forward because every single company has a different tech stack. Every single company has a different goal and a different culture. And coming in and saying that you have the right answer to everyone's problems and it's all the exact same shape is just broken. So you got to be part of an ecosystem, and we see that.
So how has your user base evolved as you kind of add more and more of that insights, right? Because I'm used to talking to kind of real-time systems architects and bunch of folks that are always in the weeds, if you will, about how do I interpret all of this wonderful data that I'm getting out of my historian. But petabytes of data, which I think comes back to your point, it's a massive amount of data that we still only tap a fraction of the insights that we could from it. But from what you're saying, it sounds like your user base is evolving. And certainly when I look at some of what you had at Connect, right? There was a lot of speakers there who were higher up the food chain than I'm used to seeing. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you're right. And when we started Seeq 12 years ago, it was the process engineer. That was our target persona, right? To use like product management speak. And they still very much are, and a key persona for us. And just like the time series answer will continue to be a key persona forever. But we've widened the base because we recognize that try as they might, process engineer is a cog in a larger machine. And one of the things that AI I think is doing that is great is it is raising the bar of expectations for folks in terms of what they can get themselves. Like increasingly people want not just links to data, which is kind of what Google gave us, right? Links to things that we could go and distill ourselves. Now people kind of want answers, and they have an expectation, rightly so, that they can access those without having to go to a person that goes to another person that goes to another person that goes to another person and gets them an answer and distills them. That's great, but it can also be cumbersome and slow. So, increasingly what we're getting as questions from our customer base is, hey, we've got in Gemini, we've got in Microsoft Copilot. Do you guys integrate with that? Because we want to be able to ask questions that you can be a part of the answer on. And that's a really good question. I mean, why shouldn't they expect that? That would be the goal. That's the best possible user experience, right? Is to be able to say, hey, why did my yield dip, last month? And maybe they don't get, maybe right now they don't get the exact answer, or it's not where they want it to be, but they should at least get a direction of, okay, who can I ask? Who can I go to next? Give me some situational awareness here because I want to explore this. But we're increasingly investing in tools and technologies that can give them that answer or be part of that answer and bring the substance to it. Because you and I haven't talked about this yet, but I think a really big part that Seeq can play in this new world that we're in is AI hallucinations are a thing. Everybody knows that. It's a good word to capture a scary concept, perhaps, but hallucinations are not relegated to just the realm of AI. I mean, humans hallucinate. I sometimes wonder, like, oh man, my memory isn't as good as it used to be. Like, did I like say that out loud yesterday, or did I just write it in a note? And so, being able to go to a system like Seeq and say, okay, great, Seeq provided part of the answer to my top level question about yields for last month. Can I then drill down through that? Can I get some traceability, some substance, some meat on those bones, and then really trust it? Right? You need to be able to trust it or ground truth it, right? And so I think it's a bit of a two-way street there of, yeah, you got to provide new personas access to data and information, insights that they didn't have before, but then also give them a way of ground truthing that. And right now there's people and personas that help curate that. And I don't see that going away, but I do see that there's an opportunity here to speed up and provide insights at more levels within an organization without as much specific curation at each level.
Okay, I've got kind of two parts I guess I want to ask you here. One is really, I heard everything you had to say there, but what are the practical steps that you are taking to broaden the data foundation? Because to your point, there's a lot of knowledge that you can leverage some of these Gen AI tools for, particularly in unstructured data, and blend that with your insights on OT data to either make that data more accessible or make sure the right people understand the context. So I think that's what you're talking about, but maybe put some meat around that. Maybe.
Sure. Practical steps. So I think it's taking in, connecting to more types of data. So like, one that is under construction right now is to take in operational data, manuals and operating curves and things like that, right? So that when folks ask questions to Seeq, like, hey, I just got this anomaly in my pump, and is this normal? Right? To be able to provide, if not the direct answer to that, but at least provide a reference to where they can go and start exploring that and using their standard operating procedures, not just general bland advice, but actual standard operating procedures that their company operates under, right? And pulling that together and making that actionable. But more than just manuals and document storage, also interconnectivity to ERP and MES systems to provide sort of that next leg of the stool and be part of that corporate ecosystem we're talking about. So those are both things that are happening right now. There's additional efforts underway that are just getting traction right now within my engineering team to interconnect to more tabular data sources. Like, we connect to a lot of different data sources at Seeq. If you go on our connectors page, you'll see like a lot of different things. But some of them are a little more narrow than we would like. Like, some of them were really targeted to get time series out of that. But there's more, like I think SAP HANA is a good example. Like, we connect to that today. But do we connect to get as much data, not out of, but connect to and leverage the breadth of data in SAP HANA? No, we could do better there, right? And we could get some of that non-time series specific data that would provide context to time series or manufacturing industrial related questions. And really our pathfind, you may say, okay, Dustin, well, how are you deciding as the leader of this organization, how are you deciding how to what to connect to and how to do that? And it's just very customer led. At our Connect conference, our user conference in the beginning of this year, we had a roundtable session with a bunch of industry leaders, and it was a phenomenal session. I'm really thankful to the folks who participated in that. One of the questions that our Chief Product Officer, Mark Durbecker, and I asked that group of folks was, if you could close your eyes and imagine the best possible software that doesn't exist yet, but like just imagine it does, what are the questions that you would type in? What are the prompts that you would type in to get And the answers we got back were fascinating, and we're treating those as our guiding light for how to make investment decisions.
And that's kind of where why I wanted you to kind of flesh it out. I think that makes it a lot more concrete for people. And my next question was going to be, all right, what are your customers asking you for?
Yeah.
And I actually, I was at Sapphire. You mentioned SAP. I was at Sapphire earlier this year, and it was very brave of them. But the manufacturing team had kind of like early version of Joule, right? And they were just asking it questions, right? And they themselves did not know what the responses were going to be. And they were asking the audience, what sort of questions? And of course, it was manufacturing people in the audience, and they were coming up with really tough questions. But, hey, I see this anomaly. Who was the operator on shift at that time?
Yes.
Or can you see, because I have this hypothesis that it's always the same shift or the same crew, because I only see it then. And so they were coming up with these kind of combinations of questions, and sometimes it did well and other times it didn't.
Yeah.
But it was kind of, I think, an eye-opener as well to the SAP folks on, okay, this is how much more we need in terms of other data and context before we're going to be able to really answer a lot of these questions. So again, it was like, I need to expand my ecosystem and the number of things that I'm able to interact with before I can answer a lot of those questions. And I'm anticipating that's what you were kind of some of the feedback you were getting probably as well from that group.
Oh, absolutely. And also, I will say, just very candidly, that some of the questions, maybe a lot of the questions that we got back, I don't think it's reasonable for me to say that Seeq will ever answer the entirety of those questions. Like, we are a piece in this greater pie. I'm not so egotistical to sit here and think, oh yeah, Seeq, we're going to answer. No. We're part of an ecosystem, and I very much see corporate AI, right? Like the Geminis, the Gleans, the Microsoft Copilots, the Chat GPTs of the world are. There's probably going to be some ordained corporate AI inside each of our customers that they're going to try and centralize around, and that's why we're building a connector into Microsoft Copilot, so that we can be responsive to questions that come in through that avenue. Maybe altruistically, but also business incentive wise, it doesn't that's perfectly. We're fine with that. Like, it doesn't have to be through the Seeq user interface, right? Like, it's very much excited about getting that value to the right eyeballs, even if it goes through a relatively contorted or non-direct path, because that's just the new future that we're on. And if Seek's only providing 30% of the answer, and some of it is needed from these other systems, and that doesn't need to be agglomerated and consolidated within Seeq, right? That could be agglomerated and consolidated through some other system, and that's excellent. I'd love to see it.
And I think it brings us back to this idea of machine to machine, and you may not be the UI, but you may be one of those machine to machine connections that's providing a lot of context.
Yes.
Particularly around time series data and wherever else you go over time. Right? And I think it also brings us back to agent and MCP and the role they are going to have, but also a lot of questions about how are they going to get orchestrated, who's going to be orchestrating them, what is the particular UI for a task or however it gets manifested, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we can answer those. I will ask you to look into your crystal ball and a little bit later when we try and wrap things up. But what are the MCP servers that people are asking you for, and conversely, what do they want you to expose, or do they want you to go? And I'm guessing SAP agents, and there's probably things around Pi and Aviva as one of the richest sources of the raw data for you. So maybe flesh out what exactly you're being asked for right now.
Sure.
By your customers as kind of like the critical agents and the critical context that they want you to provide to other systems, right?
I think that so I'll answer your question in two ways. One is for the critical systems, like what and where and how and who, it's the same cast of characters that would appear on pretty much any solution architecture slide, right? With like, okay, I'm going to connect this ERP system, this MES system, right? This historian, and like this data lake over here, and you can just imagine that cast of characters, right? And before we had lines, and maybe those lines would be REST API or some sort of a message queue system or what have you, right? And you could pretty much just like replace MCP or A to A with like each of those lines, or maybe add. So I think it's the same cast of characters. It's just less rigid ways of interconnecting is the idea. Especially when you get to highly configurable systems like some of these ERP and MES systems. Like, SAP is a great one, where people say SAP like it's a thing, but it's really a collection of things, a big collection of things. And many of them are configured very bespoke ways for specific workflows within an organization. And so it requires bespoke integration too. But AI provides the promise of that being not so just manual, that integration, right? So I think that things could speed up there, and it could be just lighter weight to get interconnectivity. So that's maybe one answer to your question. Another one, though, is I had a very interesting conversation with a customer that I won't name by name here because I didn't ask them for a permission to talk about them specifically. But in general terms, basically, some very senior leaders within their IT organization came and had a chat with me, and they happened to be in Seattle, and so we had lunch, and they're trying to get their arms around this agentic workspace or a solution space. They're trying to figure out how to do governance in that space, and how to really get their hands around, be leaders, but also be cautious, and the stewards that they need to be of such an important asset within their company. And they were asking my advice and my perspective in that, and the best that I could tell them is that you really have to look for vendors and your internal development that is willing to think outside the box, willing to lean forward, but also be very grounded with your business needs. Like, what do you need? Like, don't get caught up in the hype. Don't get bogged down by the hype. It's like, AI is real. It's not at the kind of frenzy that the hype curve is currently at, but there's some real truth there. And so, I think my advice to both myself and what I told them was to, recognize that there is serious opportunity, and don't over rotate on it, but certainly don't under rotate on it, and be willing to make a bunch of bets and not have all of them pan out. So be a bit nimble. Now is the time to be nimble, I guess. There's just too much change.
Right. We could spend a lot of time talking about the, and maybe it is the right time. Let's maybe put a little bit of the crystal ball on there, because I think we've hit a lot of the bases we wanted to hit in terms of machine to machine, its significance, that you're a player in a complex ecosystem. You can continue to add value and additional insight to other systems using MCP, A2A, whatever the next evolving standards become, right? But perhaps let's put that crystal ball on, because I'm starting to think about, because it's part of my job, right? What am I going to have to start thinking about a year from now or 2 years from now? We get lots of and our audience is very pragmatic about, I need stuff I can get a return on investment from now.
Of course.
If I'm going to continue to be allowed to spend more on more and more of these AI use cases. So they need pragmatic advice, which you just gave, but on the other hand, they also want to know, well, what's the end goal? Are there some big decisions I'm going to have to make as we end up with agents. I'm getting into physical intelligence now and kind of robots and how they're evolving, right? And hopefully there's still people in the loop as well, right? So now how do we start thinking about a future where we are orchestrating a complex ecosystem itself, or maybe not ecosystem, a complex mix of workers, which includes agents, machines, and people? That orchestration problem is not something most of our systems were designed for. So I'm anticipating there are things that we're going to, governance, security, we're already running into cybersecurity issues, exposing more attack vectors with all of these agents. You know, every agent potentially becomes another attack vector, right?
Yes.
So put your crystal ball on. Here's your chance. Your Vision Pro or whatever your metaphor is going to be, and tell me what you think that future looks like, or at least how you're thinking about the next few things you might have to start adding to your roadmap. We don't have to go too far out, but
Sure.
maybe a year out, 2 years. What are you starting to think about?
Well, I hinted at it a little bit, but I think it's good that people are expecting more from their investments, right? From their IT investments, from their OT investments. Like people are expecting, rightly, a greater level of integration, a greater level of verifiable value that these investments bring, right? The bar is constantly being leveled up. And I think AI is only accelerating those expectations, right? The expectation that productivity is going to go higher, that yields are going to increase, and that sustainability and environmental concerns are going to be addressed better. Like there's just ever increasing, more than belief, expectations, like that's the direction things are going to go. That's great, because that is really making it very clear that companies like mine need to rise to that challenge, right? And I think that it is about that interconnectivity. It's not sitting there and camping out in little silos, trying to build a fully vertically integrated piece and then convince customers that no, our way is the right way. I think that model is just not going to be successful. It has been successful to a degree in the past, but I think it's even harder for that kind of model. So I think being able to choose the best piece for what your company needs and build that ecosystem yourself that's where we're going, right? It used to be that you had a single vendor and you tried to vertically integrate as much as possible, and then you had as few problems as possible, and then people realize, okay, well, even if that was the vision in greenfield, it's definitely not possible as real life takes over. And at some point you just kind of have to say that this is the new normal. This chaos, this is the new normal, and we have to figure out ways of working successfully within that chaos. And now we've got a brand new tool that allows us to do that even more without having to break the bank in terms of a bunch of consultants and contractors and stuff coming in and trying to like glue everything together. So, I think that expectation rise is going to continue to fuel innovation. Also, I think you and I were talking about this earlier, in that vertical integration also means that you don't need to, I don't believe you need to move a bunch of data around to get the value out of it, right? That data can stay largely in the systems that it makes most sense to be the database of record for that. And then it can be interconnected throughout the ecosystem. So, data lakes and movement of data was definitely a thing there for a decade, or maybe even more than a decade. And I foresee that as fading into niche applications more and more as the need to move that data to interact with it holistically diminishes. And I see the need to have verifiability and traceability in critical decisions to be really clear. if you're going to be making big decisions, you need to know that it's something that you can trust. This isn't new. Humans are the same thing, right? If somebody comes to me and tells me something really fantastical, I'm going to be skeptical, right? I'm going to want to have them show me their work. The same is true in this AI world, maybe even more, because you can't look it in the eye, and you can't, judge its past performance and extrapolate as concretely to future performance. So really, having systems that undergird your ecosystem that you trust and that are traceable, I think is really important. So those are at least the philosophies that we're innovating under, and that's as good as my crystal ball is right now, Colin.
Okay, and I think we can flesh around that, and I think I hate it when we agree on everything.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the components I agree with. I think the idea that data quality, and not just data quality, but the traceability or the able to validate that, I think we're going to see a lot more around addressing the concerns around hallucination, or at least not everything being a black box. So we'll put more and more pressure on where did that data come from? How was it contextualized, right? Because there's definitely a pushback from the kind of data swamp approach, right? Where you're just going to move everything there and then it doesn't have context because it wasn't contextualized before you moved it, if in fact you needed to move it, which I think that varies use case by use case. So I think there's a lot of use cases where, yes, it makes sense to move and aggregate the data, but there's a lot more in our sector, in the industrial sector, where, well, it's not going to get used by anybody else other than the factory or that machine or that line, right? Or at least only a very small fraction of it after it's been contextualized and value's been added to it. Maybe it needs to go somewhere else. So I think we're in a broad alignment there. The ecosystem has become more important than ever is kind of what I think I'm reading into that. I was actually on a call with, let's just say they're highly influential, make lots of GPUs that go into lots of AI use cases. And it was interesting to hear them say the same thing, right? Which was, for us, we don't make first party solutions, at least for the most part. For us, it's all about what are the next big use cases and who are the right partners and who can make these things real, right?
Yep.
So even the hyperscalers and the other $1 trillion companies out there, I think, are increasingly dependent on, can I build a better ecosystem?
Yes.
For their growth. So I think I'm certainly seeing that as well. As always, I feel like we've probably uncovered 2 or 3 things we can talk about. We seem to talk every 6 months or a year, right? So maybe the way things are moving, we'll probably have a new topic to talk about.
Yeah.
In that time frame. So I look forward to it. Any maybe a final. I think you gave a lot of pragmatic advice there, but anything that you really, if you were preaching, you would just say, you better do this or don't do this?
Yeah. I think maybe the main takeaway on the topic of AI is, there are some people. I've had a lot of experience in my organization trying to, get adoption, through the organization. And some people grab it because it's the shiny new thing, and they just love shiny new things. And other people, they hiss when they hear a shiny new thing, and they think, oh, it's just hype. And I think my advice to folks that may be listening is that, in my estimation, anyways, AI is real, right? There's real substance there. There's real value there. The hype is certainly overblown in some areas, but don't let that turn you off, and also don't let that get you too excited. Like it's somewhere there in the middle. And then maybe a final thing, at least that I'll leave you, Colin, is one of the fun things that I like about having these on a somewhat regular cadence is you mentioned talking about Gen UI a while back for the first time, and that's stuff that I get to put into practice. So we're building some technologies right now that we will debut for the first time at Connect, which is early June of next year. That's our user conference, where we will have a Gen UI interface that allows business users to ask high-level questions and get industry-specific visualizations and data-backed displays to help answer some of those questions. So very similar to what you were talking about, Jewel, being able to do, but from a time series and subject matter expert, process engineer kind of personas distilled up to business decisions and outcomes.
Great. Look, I look forward. I assume I'm going to get invited, Dustin, to
Always, Colin.
Seeq Connect in June. So look forward to seeing that actually come to fruition in June next year.
Yep.
Once again, thanks for joining me today. You've been listening to the ARC Industrial AI podcast, and my thanks to Dustin Johnson, CTO for Seeq Corporation.